history of the slave trade in Nigeria is a story marked by complexity, tragedy, and resilience. Long before the arrival of Europeans, Nigeria was a land of thriving civilizations. Kingdoms such as Oyo, Benin, Kanem-Bornu, and the diverse city-states of the Igbo and Ibibio peoples were flourishing centers of commerce, politics, and culture. Trade routes stretched across the land, linking Nigeria to distant parts of Africa and beyond, as goods like ivory, textiles, spices, and kola nuts moved through bustling markets. In these early societies, systems of servitude existed, often involving prisoners of war, criminals, or individuals paying off debts. These forms of slavery, while harsh, were generally localized and allowed some opportunity for integration into society and even the possibility of eventual freedom. However, with the arrival of Portuguese explorers along the West African coast in the 15th century, the dynamics of slavery in Nigeria changed forever. The Portuguese, followed by the Dutch, British, and French, were not simply interested in African goods, they craved human labor for their New World plantations. The growing European demand for enslaved Africans transformed what had been a regional institution into a massive, brutal, and dehumanizing enterprise. Several powerful Nigerian kingdoms became key players in the Atlantic slave trade. The Oyo Empire, famed for its cavalry and military strength, began conducting campaigns specifically to capture prisoners for sale to European traders. These military endeavors were lucrative, and the wealth they generated helped Oyo expand its influence across Yoruba land. The Kingdom of Benin, initially cautious about participating in the trade of humans, gradually became a significant player as European goods, particularly firearms, proved too enticing to resist. Benin City grew wealthy as it became an important node in the network of human trafficking. In southeastern Nigeria, the Aro Confederacy orchestrated one of the most organized slave trading systems. Using their religious influence through the oracle at Arachukwu, the Aro people justified raids and kidnappings, capturing thousands of individuals each year. Victims were force-marched to the coastal ports, often covering great distances under harrowing conditions. There, European traders waited with ships ready to carry their human cargo across the Atlantic. The Nigerian coast itself became dotted with slave ports, each one a grim center of commerce. Badagry, Lagos, Bonny, Calabar, and Brass emerged as major export points for enslaved Africans. In these towns, captives were confined in barracoons, cramped and filthy holding cells, while negotiations between African middlemen and European merchants determined their fate. Chiefs and local rulers often acted as intermediaries, trading captives in exchange for firearms, cloth, alcohol, and other European goods. Bonny Island, in particular, became notorious for the sheer volume of slaves it exported, feeding the insatiable demand of the plantations in the Americas. The journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, was a voyage of terror and suffering. Human beings were packed like sardines into the dark, fetid holds of slave ships. Disease, malnutrition, and violence were rampant. Many captives died before even reaching the New World, their bodies discarded into the ocean without ceremony. Others resisted, attempting rebellion aboard the ships or choosing death over enslavement. It is estimated that millions of Africans from Nigeria and neighboring regions perished either during the Middle Passage or in the brutal conditions that awaited them across the ocean. The impact of the slave trade on Nigeria was devastating. Entire villages and communities were wiped out or depopulated. Wars became more frequent as different states and groups raided each other to capture more slaves, fueling a cycle of violence and insecurity. Trust between neighboring communities collapsed, as betrayal became a survival strategy. Economies that once thrived on agriculture, craftsmanship, and local trade shifted towards dependence on slave raiding and trading, destabilizing the social fabric of Nigerian societies. Despite the suffering, the people of Nigeria resisted the slave trade in various ways. Some communities fortified their settlements or fled to remote areas to avoid capture. Individuals fought back during raids or attempted to escape from bondage. Even in the Americas, Nigerians and their descendants maintained cultural practices, languages, and religions that preserved the memory of their homeland. Yoruba religious traditions, Igbo customs, Efik beliefs, and other Nigerian cultural elements became integral parts of the African diaspora's identity, influencing places as far-flung as Brazil, Haiti, Cuba, and the southern United States. By the early 19th century, growing opposition to the transatlantic slave trade began to emerge in Europe and the Americas. Driven by humanitarian concerns, religious movements, and changing economic interests, abolitionist campaigns gained momentum. In 1807, Britain outlawed its participation in the Atlantic slave trade and soon began enforcing this ban by patrolling the West African coast with its navy. In Nigeria, British officials negotiated treaties with coastal rulers, pressuring them to end the slave trade. Some leaders, like King Jaja of Opobo, tried to adapt by shifting their economies towards the export of palm oil and other commodities. However, British efforts to suppress the trade often masked deeper colonial ambitions, setting the stage for the eventual colonization of Nigeria. The legacy of the slave trade in Nigeria is profound. It weakened once powerful states, made societies more vulnerable to European conquest, and left lasting divisions among peoples. The demographic impact, the trauma of violence and betrayal, and the economic dislocations reshaped Nigeria's development for generations. Yet, amid the pain, Nigerian cultures endured and adapted. The resilience of Nigerian peoples is evident today in their languages, traditions, music, and religious practices, many of which have spread far beyond Africa's shores. In modern Nigeria, the memory of the slave trade is preserved and honored in various ways. Historical sites such as Badagry's Point of No Return, Calabar's Slave History Museum, and numerous memorials stand as reminders of the past. They are places where descendants and visitors alike come to learn, reflect, and pay tribute to the countless lives affected by the transatlantic trade. The story of the Nigerian slave trade is not just one of exploitation and suffering. It is also a testament to human endurance, cultural survival, and the ongoing struggle for dignity and justice. Remembering this painful history is essential, not to reopen old wounds, but to honor those who were lost, to understand the forces that shaped modern Nigeria, and to inspire a future where such atrocities are never repeated.